And Mark, I know it's not the same thing. They're not the same men. And a lot of the stuff said about President George W. Bush was completely unfair and unfounded. But there was a lot of criticism of President George W. Bush and his intelligence, not his mental stability, but his intelligence. Did that affect President Bush, and how did he deal with it?
Well, first thing I would say is that, I'm not so much surprised about what's inside the book. What I'm shocked about is the fact that they would let this author inside the White House for a year. I mean, the president referred to him as a total loser and a fraud. Stephen Miller just called him a garbage author, and yet they allowed him to wander around the White House for a year writing this book. So the first thing I'd say is that to reflect on what's going on in the White House is, the notion that somebody would just be walking around the White House writing a book and then nobody went up to the president and said, did you actually authorize this, and is this okay? I mean, Karl Rove or Rahm Emanuel in the Bush or Obama White Houses would have had that guy thrown out in 5 minutes. Yeah.
David, a huge impact of this book is obviously the fallout between the president and his former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, the Axelrod of the Trump White House. And Bannon has not publicly denied the incendiary comments, the quotes in the book, after which the White House released a statement saying, quote, Steve Bannon has nothing to do with me or my presidency. When he was fired, he not only lost his job, he lost his mind. Steve had everything to do with the loss of a Senate seat in Alabama held for more than 30 years by Republicans. Steve doesn't represent my base. He's only in it for himself, unquote. Obviously, I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can you think of a worse communication strategy for dealing with this than how they have done it? I mean, is there any, how would you have told them to deal with this book? Just don't even talk about it?
Well, I mean, I would have let the press secretary handle it. I would have been very muted about it. When you engage like this, as I said earlier, you just amp it up. And let me just point out one thing about Steve Miller's rather strange appearance on your show today. You can't at the same time argue that a book is pure fiction and then denounce Steve Bannon for his quotes in the book. Okay, either it's one thing or the other. And so obviously it isn't pure fiction if they think that Bannon's quotes were accurate. And obviously Bannon himself hasn't spoken, which tells you something. The author says he has some tape, which may be why Bannon hasn't denied the quotes in the book. But no, I think this has been a disastrous strategy that only raises more questions. But we should point out that even the day before this book appeared, there was a fusillade of tweets from the president that had everybody, the bizarre tweets that had everyone scratching their heads. So this book is, however accurate some of the reporting is, it builds on a year's worth of experience with Donald Trump and a year's worth of reporting by a broad array of news organizations that make you think, yeah, maybe there's something here.
Both of you have had to deal with books coming out during the Obama and Bush presidencies, respectively, ones that raised questions about internal strife, et cetera. Mark, former White House Press Secretary Scott McClellan wrote one. There was The Price of Loyalty about the former Treasury Secretary by Ron Suskind. How did the Bush White House deal with them? And what does it do internally to a White House, Mark, when people are quoted attacking each other in books like these?
Well, it's difficult, but the worst thing that you can do is flatter the book with attention. And even worse than that, threaten to sue the author. I guarantee if you want to raise sales for a book, threaten to sue the author. And as Michael Wolff said when he heard that, he said, where do I send the box of chocolates? So as a strategy, what you don't want to do is reflect too much attention onto something that's trying to get a lot of attention. But the fact is that, books written in the White House, either authorized or unauthorized, are generally never helpful, right? And especially in the first year of a presidency. First years of the most successful presidents are chaotic. So the last thing that I think, a strategist or an advisor to the president would recommend is, yeah, let's let somebody hang around the White House for the first year of the presidency and write about it.
David, you faced books like this as well.
Hey,
there was Confidence Men by Ron Suskind in 2011, The Obamas by Jody Cancer in 2012. Well, after you answer what you want to answer, tell me about inside the White House, what a book like this does.
Well, I'll answer that and then say what I wanted to say. It's not good. It's not good if you have, first of all, for the president to know that the people closest to him were saying things, even if they deny publicly that they said him, in his mind, the question will be, did they say these things? And so it is a poisonous thing when a book like this is published. Now, a lot of the folks who were mentioned, or some of them, are gone now, and you have a new regime in the White House, so it's a little bit different. But nonetheless, in the mind of a president who tends toward the paranoid, this isn't a good thing. What I wanted to say is, you say, how do you handle these things? I remember being at a White House Correspondents' Dinner, and you were probably there, and Mark was as well, when George W. Bush was delivering the comedic speech that presidents deliver. And there was one joke in there that I remember, which was, I know some people don't think I'm that smart. Honestly, I think some of my staff doesn't believes that as well, because every morning they put this intelligence briefing on my schedule. And so, that is the way you deal with these things. But you have to be a confident person to deliver a joke like that. It was a brilliant joke. It was well received. And it said, look, I know what you guys think, but it actually made him look intelligent. And so, but Donald Trump is incapable of doing that kind of thing. And instead, he reacts the way he does, and he only makes his situation worse.
Mark, final thoughts?
Well, I think what the White House needs to do as quickly as possible is stop talking about the book, move on, start talking about the agenda for 2018. And that's what Trump was doing at Camp David this weekend, which I thought was a good strategy. Publicly let people know, let the audience know, let his supporters know, and let America know that he's moving on. He's looking forward to 2018 and trying to do the job of presidency and looking ahead instead of looking back in the mirror through this book.